A comment I got recently was asking the question if it is safe to live here. And that is a multifaceted question, and we're going to dive into it a bit today. I will save my personal anecdotes to last because last time I shared about those, some people were not very happy. So I will leave those till the end, and first we're just going to talk about some facts. The U.S. Department of State categorizes the DR as level 2 out of 4, and 4 is the most extreme, which means exercise increased caution. Upon checking the travel advice from the UK, the US, and Canada, you'll probably observe that a lot of the recommendations have to do with avoiding theft. A few tips are to avoid displays of wealth, such as wearing expensive watches or jewelry. Avoid having your phone out. Don't wear your bag slung over your shoulder, make sure it's like a crossbody. And don't physically resist a robbery attempt because the attacker might be armed. If you read through all these travel advisories, you might start to feel a bit concerned. Just remember, the role of these websites, these travel advisories from the different countries, is to warn you of your risk and also give you instructions in the worst case scenario. However, probably for each person who has had a bad experience, there will be someone else, if not at least 2 or more, who have had a good experience. I think one idea that is pretty common is that people think of the Dominican Republic, they think of it as a third world country, and then automatically categorize it as unsafe, which is something, we'll see how far deep we can go into this today. Let me know any of your thoughts in the comments. First, let's just talk about the term third world country. This term has kind of become obsolete for modern speakers, with many people choosing to say developing countries, low-income countries, or least developed countries. So is the Dominican Republic a least developed country? According to Britannica, 3/5 of the Dominican population lives below the poverty line, with the majority belonging to the lower income segment. However, the Dominican Republic has made tons of economic progress since the 1960s. The country transformed from being a primarily agriculturally based economy to more of a balanced mix between the services, agriculture, and manufacturing industries. When compared with other Latin American countries, the Dominican Republic ranks first in the economic growth and 6th in per capita GDP. Furthermore, the DR's standard of living is approximately 1/3 of the US standard of living, compared to the average across the Latin American countries at large, which would be 1/4 of the US standard of living. According to the International Monetary Fund, if the DR maintains this speed of growth, then it could transform into an advanced economy by 2060. So from my research, I have seen the DR categorized as an upper middle income developing country. So yes, it's still developing, or if you want to say third world, I guess you could say that, but it is on the up and up. According to World Data Info, it was categorized as the developing nation with the 39th highest GDP. So a lot of people will think automatically third world countries are just unsafe. And I understand that connection because if you look up the poorest countries and you look up the most dangerous countries, you will probably see a great deal of overlap. But there are also other factors that play into it. And of course, as always, it depends on where you live on the island. So let's talk about Santo Domingo for a second because that is where I have experience. This is where I live. According to the Violence Risk Index, Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, is ranked a 6, which puts it solidly in the middle of the scale from a 1 to 11. Here are a few other global cities rankings for comparison. According to another crime ranking, Santo Domingo falls in 34th place, so 34th most dangerous city, I guess. But that is behind several US cities such as Memphis, Tennessee, Baltimore, Maryland, Detroit, Michigan, Albuquerque, New Mexico, St. Louis, Missouri, Oakland, California, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I think most people can recognize that big cities in general do have higher crime rates, in part due to economic inequality, but due to many other factors as well. Something else I want to note is that safety can be a very personal feeling. So, although you might see these rankings, you might think, wow, like 34 out of all the cities in the world, that seems so dangerous. I mean, yes, there are many cities in the world, but you have to consider that safety can be a very personal thing. One person can feel entirely safe in a place, even if it's a pretty dangerous city, while another one may feel just like their guard is up all the time and they cannot relax because of safety concerns. So, as much as you want to check out these risks and check out this data before you move somewhere, you do have to consider how you actually feel in the place, which is why I always say this, I recommend visiting first. And personally for me, safety is not something I consider too much. But you might come to this country, you might see the bars over all the windows and just the walls that are up everywhere around buildings, stores. I feel like, I don't know if this is such a safe place. And of course, you can look on those travel advisory sites, get tips, but they're nothing that I wouldn't do normally in a big city, like having my bag be a crossbody or keeping my personal belongings really close to me or not wearing a lot of expensive jewelry, things like that. Like even my ring, like sometimes I'll turn it in so that, the stone is on the inside. But these are things that I would probably do in any big city. Like if I was going to New York, I would do that. So it really comes down to how you feel. If you feel like it's too dangerous for you, then probably it's not a good place for you to live. So that brings me to talking about my personal experience. When I moved to Honduras, they were very sure to reassure me that it's a very safe place, because specifically this town that I was in was a safe place. I never had any locals tell me how to do something or what not to do, walking in the street, walking home from school, because it wasn't that much of a concern for anyone. So no one was ever telling me things like that. And then I came here and I wasn't really thinking about that, but I would go to school and come back. I would have my laptop in my backpack, my phone, expensive things. And I remember one of the teachers one time, he was like, be careful, with your laptop, because one time a student got robbed going back from school and they robbed his laptop, took his backpack. So I was aware that was a risk and I was like, okay, noted. They also told me to be careful about motorcyclists because they'll easily just snatch something when you're walking on the side of the road or on the sidewalk. That did happen to a roommate of mine, and another friend or two, I don't know, have gotten their phone snatched if they had it out. So like the tips advise, keep your phone and personal belongings out of sight and your bag secured. So that is something that I've always tried to do. But I can't say that I really felt unsafe in the areas that I've lived in. But when I go to a place like Duarte or sometimes I'm in Valiente, there I will be a little bit more on guard, a little bit more cautious, stay close to my husband. And that's just normal. Most people do that anyways in those places. And something else that people were saying, the people from my church, I used to live 1 block from my church, and there was an activity that I would go to at nights. It would be sort of sun setting as I would go there, and so it would be dark whenever the activity would end, and they would never let me walk home the 1 block. They would always insist on driving me, and they would tell me one time there was a thief or a robber, or someone broke into the house next door and things like this. So they always wanted me to be safe, and I really appreciate that, and they would take care of me. So these are all things I heard, and I was like, I don't feel personally unsafe, but hearing this from locals, I would follow their advice and do what they suggest because they probably know best. So is the DR a safe place? I would say it definitely depends on the area. It depends on how you feel too, because if you don't feel safe, then, there's not much you can do to change that. Someone who has had 1 bad experience is probably going to have a much more tainted view than someone who has had no bad experiences. So for me, thankfully, I've never had any bad experiences, never gotten pickpocketed, but I know several people who have. So the risk is definitely there. And personally, I don't feel unsafe. But one more aspect of safety, there is the crime aspect. Another aspect is driving. The DR has one of the highest rates of accidents in the world, and if you come here and you see how they drive, you'd understand why. And also a lot of cars definitely would never pass inspection in the US, and they might not be very safe, so that might contribute to people being more easily injured or killed if there is an accident. You do have to consider that as part of the risk, as one of the factors of safety. And I think now people are ever more concerned about another aspect, which is the fact that this island is split between 2 countries, and one of those countries is Haiti, and right now they're going through a lot, and people are seeing how close the Dominican Republic is. But so far, there has not been any risk to the Dominican Republic, at least if you are far away from the border. I know there were some issues around the border for a bit, but they closed it recently. And as of now, in the Dominican Republic, at least in Santo Domingo, there aren't really any issues with safety that are connected directly to the conflicts in Haiti. We talked about a lot today, and I'm sure that people have things to say in the comments. Share your experience, share any facts you know. I'm open to learning too, but this is just my opinion. Is it safe to live here? My answer is, it depends. But I feel safe. So, there you go. Hope this could help someone. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.